Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another founder-led sales stories where founders who have successfully navigated their founder-led sales journey share with those who are still in the middle of it. I'm Pete Kazanji, author of Founding Sales, the Startup Sales Handbook, and your host. Today we have Marty Kausas, CEO of Pylon, makers of the support platform built for B2B. Marty successfully led Pylon's founder GTM to millions in ARR, having raised north of $20 million from fantastic investors like General Catalyst and Andreessen Horowitz. My biggest takeaways from today's discussion were on Marty's clever anti-sale, their use of Slack in their sales motion to accelerate deals, and their founder-led LinkedIn content for pipeline generation. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. So with that, here's Marty. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Founder-Led Sales Stories, where founders who have successfully navigated their founder-led sales journey share with those who are still in the middle of it. Today, we've got Marty Kausas, CEO of Pylon, makers of the support platform built for B2B, the Modern B2B Support Platform. I was looking at the website earlier.
That's right. Yeah, that's definitely how we pitch it.
Yeah, that's right. Want to make sure I nailed that. So I'm very excited to talk with Marty today for a variety of reasons. One, he's led Pylon's founder-led sales GTM to millions in ARR. They've raised north of $20 million from fantastic blue chip investors like General Catalyst, Andreessen Horowitz, et cetera. But what I talk with founders a lot about how much founder-led selling they should do before they abstract out and hire AEs. Marty and friends closed north of 100 customers before bringing on their first AE, which is pretty impressive. That's a lot of repetitions. He was also an early adopter of what I like to kind of call like founder-led LinkedIn content, right? Founder-led content as a pipeline generation vector. Started doing that more than a year ago, which I think now people are starting to really realize the power of there. So these are some of the things we'll discuss. We'll discuss about other things as well. But excited to discuss all that and more. So Marty, I'm really glad to have you here, man.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the intro. And yeah, really excited to share for especially folks that might be a couple of years behind how, what I would change or advice I would give to people starting out.
You would never change anything. You got everything right on the first try, obviously.
That's definitely not true. Yeah, there were actually two years of pivoting before we started Pylon. So I did a lot of things wrong. And so, yeah, tons of advice that I, at this point, share with a ton of people, and happy to record that for once.
You're the best. Wonderful. Play it forward. So, I mean, just really quickly, I know I gave a very lightweight, product marketing pitch there earlier, but what problem does Pylon solve? What is the kind of the organizational persona and then the human personas associated with that? And then maybe some kind of like parameters around average deal size, kind of, the current sales organization, et cetera.
Yeah. So starting with what we actually do, you nailed it on the high level description, which is we're a support platform built for B2B companies. The way to think about this is that in consumer companies, you just have one customer facing team that just does transactional ticketing. So, hey, like refund my thing, change password, like very simple questions that are easy to solve and very high volume. In B2B, you have many customer facing teams. You have not just customer support, you have customer success, solutions, professional services, account management. On the pre-sale side, you have AEs. All these people who have touch points with customers and have conversations that are important for solving customer issues post-sales. And so, you'd never think a Zendesk would be able to, for example, sync into like Gong call recordings. Like it doesn't really make sense, but in a B2B context, it totally makes sense. And so there are all sorts of B2B specific workflows and pieces of data that existing ticketing platforms do not sync in or do not make useful for answering these more complex issues that they have. So we're the first company that's building a platform specifically for these B2B use cases. And actually our initial wedge, I'd say, is that we found that people were starting to move their customer communication away from email to shared Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, Discord, have new conversational channels. And so that was actually our starting point. And then it kind of evolved and we expanded our scope of not just solving that one problem, but the holistic B2B problems that all these companies have.
I love it. I love it. So, and then so I would imagine that the size of organization that starts to care about that is probably they probably have a good commercial motion going. They have customers. They are able to repeatedly add them. So, what around what size of organization or size? What are the parameters of the organization that cares about this? And then what are the who are the humans that you are talking to in those organizations in order to close business?
Yeah, definitely. So generally like 50 employees to let's say like 500 employees are our current range. The 50 employees on the lower end are because you need some sort of like scaling problem that you start to encounter. So if you just have like founders doing customer support, you probably don't need a support system yet because they will not be able to live in another tool. They just like need, like they're just going to jump around. They're not going to optimize it. They're not going to get a lot of the value out of a product like Pylon. Whereas, okay, if you start hiring a support team or have CSM, suddenly they're going to need a system to work out of, a place to build workflows in, a place to store data. And that's like the minimum size where we start to come in and provide value. Then the 500 employee size, technically we can sell to much bigger, but just from a change management perspective, it's really hard to convince someone to switch off an existing platform like a Zendesk or Salesforce Service Cloud if they're too big. So we do have customers who are over 500 employees, but generally it's a much harder sell. And frankly, our sales motion is it's much easier if someone's not ingrained in their current support platform or potentially were there first.
You'll get there eventually. I mean, that's a fairly common scenario where, like, when Salesforce was originally going to market, they would tackle the organizations that didn't have, didn't have a CRM in place just yet, or alternatively, like, had a pretty mediocre Siebel
Yep.
deployment that was happening. Then like their point of view at the time was like, yeah, we'll get to those Siebel guys in 2 years. Or like the organizations that are heavily deployed on a Siebel, a meaningful Siebel deployment in 2 years.
Right.
We'll get you later.
Right.
Hold that thought. We'll be back. And then who are the humans that you guys are selling to? Are these support titles? Are they customer success titles? Is it the CRO? Or like, is there operations involved? It's probably not
Yeah.
IT at that size.
No, not IT yet. It's usually a support or customer success leader. And because B2B can be so fluid with like what support or success means, depending on who they're selling to themselves, it can be either one. So if you're a super white glove customer experience type company, then it might be called customer success. Or if you have kind of more transactional support as well, then you might have support and success split out into two different teams. And so we find ourselves selling to both personas. And then generally, like if it's a smaller company, it might be one of the early CSMs. If it's a larger company, it's probably a VP on the team.
Awesome. Love it. And then what is your average deal size, magnitude, and kind of like deal cycle look like right now?
Yeah. So smallest deal that we've ever done is probably 1K ACV. The largest deal
That
for
was the
us
first
is,
deal. So what they were like, what does this cost? And you're like, $100 a month.
yeah, it wasn't actually, we tried to go 15K ACV for our first customer. But then
Good.
but no,
Respect.
it failed. We tried and then they negotiated us down to 2.7K, which, so
How about
they really
fifteen
got
thousand
us.
dollars? How about two?
Yeah, it was actually really embarrassing. We hopped on the call. It wasn't embarrassing, but they really got us. It was
Good
actually
lesson.
this guy who's now an angel investor in us, Jew from High Touch, and he hops on the call. He was not our champion at the time. He was the economic buyer, and so we hop on the call. We basically he's like, okay, so what's the pricing? And we're like 15K, and then he's like, okay, and is that based on like seats or usage or whatever? We're like, nope, it's just 15K flat. Like the best, and
No,
you can
no
use it forever
no
at that price.
rationalization.
And he's like, okay, guys, this is way too expensive. And also we know that you don't have any customers. So they knew, right? They knew basically that they were going to be our first customer. So he was like, why don't you come back to me with a more reasonable pricing? And so we went back to him. I don't know. We probably dropped it down to like half of that. And then I had to go even lower. And so eventually we got to 3K. And then he's like, okay, sounds great. But also, can you give us a first year discount of like, 10% or whatever it was? So he really got us like so far down. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Got it. Well, sometimes that's what has to happen when you're landing your first folks. Okay, got it. So current ACV is around
Cur-
10K or
Around
so.
10K. Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. And then how big's the sales org right now?
So we have 5 AEs today, two
Wonderful.
SDRs, and then we have kind of supporting roles around them, like RevOps lead and growth marketer as well.
Nice. I love it. Okay. So it sounds like things are humming. Things are
Yeah.
humming and set up in the right direction thanks to all of your laying the groundwork and kind of the infrastructure there. What was your background before starting Pylon?
So I was a software engineer, graduated, had studied computer science, went to go work at Airbnb, paid off college debt as quickly as I could. And that was
Nice.
really effective for that. And then 2 years after, left, wanted to start a company. I pivoted around for essentially 2 years on many, many ideas that were not good and did not work out. And then eventually we landed on the idea for Pylon. And so, yeah, definitely like trudged through the mud for quite a bit on like through pivot hell essentially until we got the initial idea for Pylon. Then it all started moving very quickly. And so, yeah, that was in November 2022 is when we had the idea.
And so where did the initial kind of like problem hypothesis come from
Yeah. So there
first,
were,
and then how did you go about validating it?
okay. So for some context, I think it's important to always understand what your motivation is for starting a company. For us, so me and my two co-founders, Advitz and Robert, when we joined forces in 2022, we decided that we were really excited about building a company for fun and for the adventure of it. And so it really wasn't a like, oh, we're going to be super passionate about X, Y, or Z. It was more, this is like the most exciting thing that we can think of doing right now. And so we had like this romanticized idea of what starting a company could be, and got excited about it. And so it was really the adventure that we were going for. And then in
I love
terms
it.
of like what like type of company we wanted to build, it was very much we set a goal for ourselves to build a $10 billion plus public company in 10 years. That was the goal. And so it was, very large size and
Love it.
like realistic timeline if everything went well. And so we kind of even though we're all engineers, took more of an MBA style approach of like, okay, let's look at like existing companies that get to $10 billion plus, like what's common about them. And so we looked at how many public SaaS companies are worth over $10 billion. And turns out there aren't that many. There are actually only like 26 that get to that size, or that have gotten to that size. So very, very few. And if you look at them, like one of the common themes is almost all of them are horizontal like products, or they're in mega
Platforms.
markets. Exactly. Yeah. So you have Salesforce that sits at the top, $300 billion market company. And what you realize is that, yeah, you have to just be in a giant industry and you have to have a product that you can sell to almost everyone. And eventually you probably also have to become multi-product. Like all those things are true at the same time. So if you look at Salesforce, first off, their revenue is like really split across many SKUs.
Yep.
And interestingly, actually, their top SKU is not their CRM. I don't know if you know this. It's Service Cloud,
It is
their
Service
customer
Cloud.
support platform. So we looked at, okay, for one, we should build a horizontal product. And then okay, which one? We looked at Salesforce, biggest SaaS company in the world, and looked at their biggest revenue driver. And we said, okay, that seems like a good market to go after. Service Cloud generates 9 billion in revenue per year. And so we thought, okay, let's like try to be in that category generally. And so that was part one. That was variable one that we wanted of make sure we have a really big market so we don't get capped later. Step two was, can we find some sort of emerging trend within the market? Because we thought the fastest growing companies were the ones that latch onto some sort of like new thing that's happening.
Some sort of
And
platform shift or what have you. Yeah.
exactly. And so our initial insight, we basically went out, we cold DM'd people on LinkedIn. At the time, the limit was like 40 messages per day per founder. So each of us would send 40 personalized messages to people on LinkedIn who had like newer-ish job titles in like customer support. So it would be like support engineering, customer success, which isn't new, but like still newer, solutions, professional services. And so we were just like blindly trying to learn what they do and what they care about. So we would hop on these calls. So each of us, to give you a sense of the numbers. So if each person sends like 120 personalized messages per day, let's say you like book 5 meetings for the next week from that per day, then you have like 5 discovery calls essentially. And we would hop on these calls.
That's right.
First off, our message to them was like, okay, hey, we're founders who are pivoting. We're trying to learn about your space. Like, do you have 15 minutes to chat? Like it was something super simple like that. So we send those messages, they hop on, thank you to all the people who did. And then we'd ask them, hey, what do you care about? What tools do you use? What does your boss care about? How do you get promoted? Like kind of like all these things. And one of the trends we started to learn about over time, it was not super obvious at first, was that a lot of people were moving their B2B communication away from email to more conversational channels. So Slack, Microsoft Teams, Discord, WhatsApp, Telegram. And we thought that was a really interesting trend. It made sense to us that that would continue. And then also it was breaking all these business workflows that people would typically build around. So like very simple example. And actually Peter was one of the people we spoke to, I think, during this process in the early days of someone we reached out to on cold LinkedIn and chatted with us. And a sample workflow where, let's say you're chatting with someone in a shared Slack channel that's a prospect, no activity is going to sync in your CRM. Or for example, you want to send a product update or a marketing blast to these people and you primarily talk to them on Slack, not email. You might want to send it there instead. Or, hey, you want to open up a support ticket and have that sync into a ticketing system. You can't do that. And so there are all these business workflows that break. We felt like the most, the important one that we wanted to latch onto was that support use case. And so that's where we started. And our initial product was actually just building a Zendesk to Slack connector where you could have, let's say, 100 shared Slack channels with your customers, and then you can ticket messages to go into your existing ticketing. So that was product number one and how we got there.
I love it. I love it. I think the insight there about the communication platform shift is a very good one. Folks may not realize it. You might know this, but most of the large support software providers came from the advent of email.
Yep.
Around 20 plus, maybe even longer ago. Some of the early ones, there was a company called Kana. When email showed up, all of a sudden people were like, well, what can we do with this thing? I guess we can send emails in order to market to people. What else could we do with this thing? Maybe people could email us about things like, I want to buy things from you, or I bought something from you and it's broken. Fix it, right? Like a support use case. And so it makes sense that a lot of the existing infra is around that email thread metaphor, which is where they originally kind of came from, and it just has kind of followed through. And then all of a sudden, now we've got these messaging platforms, which thanks to Slack, and then of course thanks to Team, has kind of changed that paradigm. And as you point out, that seems like a very compelling wedge there, which conveniently people were already doing. And I think that's the critical thing. Or how were they doing? Were they like taking screenshots of Slack conversations, then like pasting them into like tickets, or how did you know that, like, all right, this is a pain point. People are already doing this. Like there's gonna be willingness to pay here.
Yeah, we heard all sorts of stories around people trying to rip that. So first off, it was very clear that customers love talking to their vendors on Slack. Like that was crystal clear to us. It made sense to us why that's such a nice experience. And then we also heard about people like vendors who would try to rip it away from their customers as they scale, because they're like, hey, this is not scalable. We can't track SLAs. We can't assign this, whatever. And their customers would revolt, and they'd be like, hey,
just go ahead and send us a support ticket. They're like,
right.
No.
Right.
You create the support ticket for us from the Slack message.
I remember there was this one vendor who, I won't name their name, but they had a contract with Netflix. And so that was like one of their marquee customers. And they had promised in the contract to offer a shared Slack channel like the first year. And then the next year they tried to like quietly take that out of what they offered.
Just kidding.
And Netflix literally called them out on it, apparently. And they were like, hey, why isn't the Slack channel included in here? And so they were like, fuck, okay, I guess we have to keep it. And so you basically then are in that position where it's like, okay, I like basically have to keep doing this, but I really need a way to scale this way of operating. And so, that was our unique insight where, okay, what if we could be that bridge? And to answer your question on how people were doing it before, there's a combination of like integration tools that had existed already, where, that people were using. One of them was this product called Help that was acquired by Atlassian, but they were more focused on like the IT ticketing use case, but none that were great, to be honest, for the customer facing use case. So yeah, that was our initial insight there. And then timing wise, this type of like starting from this point, Slack Connect only had come out maybe a couple of years, 2, 3 years before we started the company. And so you did need to give time for this way of operating to mature, because we had heard of like many YC companies who had tried this idea. In fact, YC thought our idea was shit. They were like, oh, we've seen many startups who have start with this idea. They always end up pivoting. How are you different? And one of our theses was that, hey, the timing was wrong. They were too early, and you needed the network effect of like more and more people like doing this to start to take off.
Yeah, and usually the way that you can validate that is like when you're doing those customer interviews, like people are actually doing it right now, right? Like, oh, like, this is a pain when it's on our to quote my friend Rob Snyder, it's on their list to solve
Right.
versus showing up and being like, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this? Be like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Sounds awesome, man. It's not on my
Yeah.
list.
I will say it is interesting. Like a lot of the people we spoke to early on were like, oh, this is just like something we're doing temporarily until we start scaling. And that was like that was a reaction we got from a lot of people, because no one saw Slack or Microsoft Teams as like a long-term way to support customers. But then there's no end to taking it away. Like it's just too good of an experience where, and so they had to be like massaged to understand that, like, okay, actually, like, yes, it's not great for us internally the way we operate, but we do need to support it at least temporarily or medium term, because we can't rip it away from customers. And actually our customers really, really enjoy it. So so there was a little bit of like, customer education that we had to do, where we had to, like, this type of product didn't exist. They weren't looking for this type of product necessarily, because they thought that no one else operated. Like a lot of people thought they were the only ones offering shared Slack channels to their customers. So we had to kind of teach them that, no, actually a lot of people do this. And yeah, this is, we've actually built a solution to this problem, and it's hard to rip away the stuff from your customers once you start. And now at this point, 2 years and 8 months into the company, like we rarely encounter people who give us those same reactions that they did initially. Now it's almost starting to be an expectation that your support platform should be.
Yeah, for sure. So running the clock all the way back when wasn't an expectation. Who was your first customer? How did you close them?
Yep. So first customer was a company called High Touch. They're now Series C. They're started as like a reverse ETL tool, but evolved into like a marketing data platform company. And the story is, I was on the phone with Robert and Advith. We were going through our like pivoting journey, and Advith had spoken to someone right before. This is like a Sunday night, and I'm on the phone with Robert and Advith, my co-founders. He's like, hey, I think this whole Slack thing is really important. I think that potentially there's a product to be built around, this customer support thing on Slack. And so I was living in a hacker house. So I hung up the phone and I went upstairs. 10 people lived in this hacker house. It's really well known, called Mission Control. And so I like go up to the second floor, and I see Tejas, one of the co-founders of High Touch, on the couch. And I'm like, hey, Tejas, like, do you guys have this problem? And he's like, Marty, you're not going to believe it, but we're actually looking for a solution right now. And so it was like this, like probably 20 seconds between hanging up the phone and like me going upstairs, that we found our first prospect who was interested in, or he was willing to set up time between myself and the head of support engineering, Teresa, at the company. And so, at that point we had no name, we had just Gmail addresses, no domain, anything. So that was how we found our first prospect, and then started talking to them.
Yeah, but I think usually it's a pretty good sign. I mean, that one, they have it on their list of things to do, and that it might have been just luck, or alternatively, you might have been in a very target-rich environment where if you had encountered any software entrepreneur, they would have been like, "Yes, that is actually something that's on my." Seems like a good sign there. I love it. So how did you get over your fear of sales? Did you have a fear of sales? Was it natural to you? Was it something that took a lot of doing? How did you go about solving it?
Yeah, I definitely did. I had some fear of sales. I especially had fear of recording calls, or specifically like follow-ups to sales calls. So I think getting on the call early on, we approached it more out of curiosity, almost always, where we were trying to be super consultative. And frankly, like the initial 15-minute call that we would do with people in the support space when we didn't have an idea yet, actually were very similar to our initial sales calls, where we would just ask a lot of questions, and that was pretty much it. So I would just try to ask
That's right.
questions until we
Just
could
keep
like
going. Keep it
find
doing.
someone. Yeah, until they admit they have the problem, or if they don't, then you kind of move on. So it was really mostly just that, and it's not like we were cold calling initially. We were just sending LinkedIn messages, so that wasn't scary. And so I think generally like there was like a little bit of fear, especially around like pricing conversations. But outside of that, I think that yeah, the discovery process was mostly just asking questions, which I like doing anyway. Yeah,
Exactly. To the extent that you can keep it like make it conversational, or at least in your mind, um, we're uncovering whether or not you have this problem, right? I'm not trying to convince you of something that you don't need, right? I'm just trying to find out if you have this problem, and then moreover, and then if you do, guide you towards what I think would be a good solution to it. But if you don't think it's the best solution, then that's okay too. But even if you're just the primary thing, the same way that like Paul Graham talks about how the the number one thing that kills startups is um, building something that people don't actually want. The number one thing that kills sales conversations is by talking to someone who doesn't have the problem you solve.
right, right.
Right. So if you just spend your time, you're like, hey, I just want to figure out whether or not you guys like are addressing this, like have this issue in house, and if you do, how big it is, and if it's a priority, and if it's not, or if it's not a priority, that's cool. We can be friends still. But if it is, I have lots of information I can share with you. I have a product that helps with this, but I also just have information I can share with you as well because I'm really expert at this. And then usually
Yeah,
like defangs the entire conversation in a way, like not just for you as a seller or a founder seller, but also for them. Like, oh, great. We're having a colleague beer. Sounds great. I'm into it.
yep. Yeah, I think what I would tell people is you're basically trying to get to a no as quickly as possible. And then if you can't get a no, you'll probably get to a yes. And so you should like anti-sell your product quite quick. You should basically try to like give all the reasons why someone wouldn't use your product quite early. And then if they really have the problem, all those reasons won't matter. And so you can actually, and then you'll eventually get to like a yes. So you could even tell them like, hey, actually, it sounds like you don't really care about supporting customers on Slack. That's totally okay. And they could stop you and be like, oh no, actually, I really care about that. Like, and yeah, another thing that really helped, the Mom Test, like classic book on kind of how to understand whether people actually need the thing you're building. The advice I got as well was sell before build. So especially if you're coming from an engineering background, like you should definitely like try to sell your product before you build it. And specifically, like the thing that helped us the most was asking people not only, hey, would you use this? Would you pay for it? But asking like, would you pay $10,000 on Monday once we have it ready? And then like people immediately are truthful with you and they're like, probably not. And so, yeah, that is like one of the most important things that helped us on the journey. And we got way faster at iterating once we started doing that. And so we would skip like design mocks, we would skip, touching, writing any code. Then it was like very much, okay, idea, philosophy, like can this become big? And then validating the premise with these people that we were booking calls with.
How did pricing start out? How did you guys evolve it? Obviously, you shared with us that your original pricing was $15,000. Okay, why? Because $15,000. And then
Yeah.
of course, my touch was like, and how about you give us that nice 90% you don't have any customers
Yeah.
discount? And you're like,
Yeah.
yes, we will give you that. Presumably that was not the pricing for the next customer, the next customer, the next customer. How did that change over time? How is Pylon price, and like how did it start out and how do we get to the current state?
Yeah, we've changed pricing at least 10 times. The
Huh.
first, so I remember, yeah, no, and it's just like the reality, especially if you're changing your product or evolving your product into a platform or becoming multi-product, which we have, like it has to change. Okay, we have like to set the stage, we have like this call coming up with High Touch to discuss pricing. We know they want the product, we know we're the preferred vendor. And we had just gotten into YC at the time and we try to get help from one of the YC partners, Dave Lieb, who's like one of the people assigned to us. And so Dave hops on the call. We're like, hey, how do we price this? What do we do? And he basically said, you just have to make something up. And like, if there isn't necessarily a product in the market that you can price off of, then yeah, you just have to like come up with something random. And so that's exactly what we did, and how we got to that 15K. And the advice that he gave was like, try to make yourself a little uncomfortable with how expensive it is. Like, don't like go too low. That like you, because you also want to know that they're getting real value out of the product too. So if you're just charging like $5 a month, it's like, okay, like, is that actually that valuable? Like, will they advocate for it internally? Like, I don't know, kind of unclear. But if it's 15K, then it's like, okay, this is like a serious thing that they're actually purchasing. It's like real money. It's not just like, a $5 subscription they don't need any approval for. So the advice to be uncomfortable for that first deal was good. And then as we evolved, we started trying to think about, so we did the platform thing like multiple times after, but we started to then evolve into more like channel-based pricing. So because our thing was so focused on Slack initially, it's like, okay, how many customer Slack channels was some way to measure how big your team is or like how many customers you had.
Also utility. So, oftentimes you want there to be linearity around like the unit of value that the customer, that the customer is able to realize from your solution. Like as they get more and more value, then you should participate in that. And then you guys, in case like you were orchestrating these channels, that seems like a very nice kind of like linear relationship there.
Yep, exactly. So we started doing like $5 per channel per month was the initial, cost, and then with some like minimum number of channels. And so, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you kind of like sell whatever you can, to just get some logos on the website and have some case studies. And then so we did that for a bit. And also maybe some important context, like the way we got our next set of customers, I'd say like the first three were probably people that were like loosely in network somehow. So we tried to leverage like one person, hey, do you know anyone who has this problem or whatever? And then the next set were all like LinkedIn cold outreach, because that's how we had like discovered this problem in the first place. So it's like, okay, we keep hitting that channel, then that's probably going to produce more leads. Yeah.
Yep,
And then,
for sure, for
yeah.
sure. What were
I
you gonna say?
I was going to say, and then, yeah, in terms of like how pricing eventually evolved, so we were doing this like per channel pricing. Then we like evolved into an entire support platform versus just the Zendesk connector.
Right,
And
right.
so once we did that, now we're supporting email support as well. And it's like, okay, emails have no channels. So how do you like add that to the price? What if someone's more email based than Slack based? And so at that point, we started pricing against what Zendesk price was. And so we just wanted to make it easy for people to say, okay, if I'm evaluating both Zendesk and Pylon, which would be the two options, most of the time, then it would be a simple decision based on product value and features rather than, so just make it super simple and don't overcomplicate it.
And so did that mean then align to just like per agent seats, which is I
That's right.
think how Zendesk prices, if I recall correctly.
That's right. Just like simple, honestly, like SaaS-based pricing of use, like how many seats you have. And then eventually we kind of scale that to also have additional SKUs. And also to the specific evolution, it's like at first we had one seat, one tier, one seat. It was like probably like $70 per seat per month and like no tiers of seats. It was just that. And then it was like, okay, we introduced a second tier of seat, then we introduced a third tier of seat, then we introduced like a couple add-ons of like, oh, if you want Microsoft Teams now, that's like an add-on. And so, we kind of like played with pricing and tried all sorts of things there. And then eventually we got rid of a lot of like the initial add-ons that really just made sense as like, part of the different tiers of seats. And then also started adding on like AI functionality as well, which, people were willing to pay more for and made sense. And also was frankly like market standard, for, hey, if I want like AI agents or I want some sort of AI assistance, they're already, if they want that, would have to pay some certain price if they're using some other tool. So we started to pitch ourselves then as like this consolidation of, hey, you have like the core platform and then agents or AI assistants or account intelligence. These are like all add-on SKUs that you otherwise would have to buy another product for. And we try to price our variant as the same or cheaper than, the point solution they'd have to otherwise purchase.
Right, got it. Yeah, I like to think about being uncomfortable. So there are a couple things to call out there. Yes, you want to be uncomfortable, so they have to be getting value. The other thing too is kind of the inverse. If they just say yes, then you automatically know like, whoops, could have probably been higher there. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, yeah, aligning to. I mean, was it Dave Dave's recommendation, or Leap,
Yeah, Dave Lee. Yeah.
uh, his recommendation of, you know, making it up isn't, isn't untoward. Now, to the extent that there are um, examples in the market that that like organizations expect to buy from. Now, when you guys started out, Slack connectors, there wasn't really something in the market. But if you were showing up and you were a uh, support platform that is focused on real-time messaging versus just email with an AI kicker, and that is a platform evolution of the existing, like a platform shift of an existing category, which is like ticketing software, then aligning to how people are comfortable with buying, as you point out, seat-based, it can be a very effective thing to do, which is what you guys did after you eventually got to the point where people were saying, oh, there's that thing. So for folks that are listening to this, if you can start out and say, hey, what are people buying right now in this space that we look like, because that'll, reduce the friction, because that's what we want to do, is you just want to be easy to buy from. And so easy to buy from can be, oh, this makes sense to me. Or another thing it can be is, yeah, maybe this new pricing model that Marty is proposing makes sense to me, but I got to turn around and communicate that to somebody else who's going to say, like, wait a minute, why are we like, why is this priced this way? Like, shouldn't it just be seats? I love it. So in addition to your pricing evolving over time, did your ideal customer profile evolve? Like, the types of
Yep.
organizations that you're selling to, the humans that you were starting with in your sales motion?
Yeah, so we had to look for who has this problem. So one of the we understood that this was an emerging way of operating, of offering shared Slack channels to customers. And so only especially when it comes to the Slack side of like all these different like new channels that we're opening up, that was mostly tech companies, frankly. So it was earlier stage tech companies were the ones who were like fast to adopt this way of operating. We could see it while NYC that like all the new companies would operate this way. So we saw the wave coming. And so it was clear that the next generation was going to, offer these channels. But it did mean that, hey, we can't go to like some older company and try to sell this product to them because they probably aren't there yet. So it was definitely like catch the next wave. And one thing, one way we would pitch this to people was like, yeah, B2B is having its omni-channel moment right now. And so, yeah, we could see, the next generation of companies coming. So it had to be earlier stage. We thought though that we really did not want to sell to like YC companies because they're too young and like they don't have enough problems and they don't want to pay and like they just have all these problems. So instead, we were trying to sell to the like Series B plus companies, especially when we had that Zendesk connector to start because they had budget, they had like a process. Yeah, exactly. So it was like Series B through D companies were our ideal. Then once we evolved like a year into the company and said, hey, it's not just going to be the connector anymore. We're actually going to be the full platform. That's when we realized, okay, if we're trying to be a whole platform, Series B companies have harder requirements. So actually we have to start with smaller companies and work our way up. So we basically went smaller. We were okay then with the
Down
YC
again.
type company. Yeah. And that's where you get like 1K deals of like 3-person company. They just need a basic ticketing system and that's it. And then kind of worked our way up. And so I think like our long-term strategy in terms of like go to market will be more like a Rippling or like a HubSpot where you kind of start with like earlier stage companies. And as the requirements, as you can like solve a harder and harder, more advanced requirements, then you can chip away at more upmarket customers.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's a fairly common thing. Like early on, when your product has limitations, or what you want to, or um, you always want to be focused at the most like most receptive organizations that have the requirements, like, have the technographic characteristics or the firmographic characteristics or the like human characteristics. And so in you guys' case, that meant that these larger organizations who had enough of a problem with enough CSMs that they would have lots of Slack channels rolling around
Yep.
if they offered Slack or Teams
Yep.
as a communication vector. And then
Yep.
of course, the only organizations that were doing that are the younger kind of nerdy ones. So essentially what it was, like you guys were at the frontier of organizations that were small enough where they could start doing the real-time messaging stuff, or organizations that started that when they're small and they had like grown up over the ensuing 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or what have you. And then you could imagine probably then, you know, beating the drum from a demand gen standpoint to kind of push out there, like, have you considered doing real time, like essentially selling their religion in order to sell the Bible, in addition to finding folks right now who already are doing, you know, real time messaging for
Yeah.
their
And
support
we've
stuff.
seen it. We're so lucky that, um, the whole like mentality on Slack definitely has changed. I think that, yeah, it's naturally just become such a common way of operating where people don't question it anymore. And I think that was, in part, we definitely helped that. And now people are super familiar with seeing like the Pylon bot in their vendor Slack channels. And we get messages all the time of like people I haven't seen for years who are like, oh, like just saw Pylon for the first time, like in a channel. And so, yeah, that it just, there's this like virality as well, because imagine, let's say, High Touch installs Pylon into all their shared Slack channels. All of their customers then see it. And then, they're going to become familiar with, oh, like this is like, you found a tool that like scales this. Like maybe we should do that as well. Or we've even had like our the customers of vendors that we sell to go tell their other vendors, hey, you should use Pylon to like make sure our tickets are tracked. And so, yeah, it definitely has like a
This was
virality
so
to it.
good. My high touch support experience as assisted with Pylon was so compelling. All of you vendors also have to support me this way.
No, no, literally. I mean, that happens. Yeah. We see that happen.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. Oh, so maybe kind of walk me through kind of your initial sales motion there. I mean, I think you guys published something on how you guys got your first 15 customers or so, but how did like what are that initial sales, like the very, very founder-led sales motion? Of course, post walking upstairs to your living room at the Hacker House and selling Tejas. What did that sales, maybe you can kind of walk us through what that sales motion looked like, who the people were that you talked to, how many meetings it took, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first three, so first one I mentioned was the High Touch guy, who I literally lived with. The next two were also people in network. So one was someone who had tried to recruit one of my co-founders, Advith. So he was like a founder and we were just emailing every founder we knew. So it was someone who had tried to recruit my co-founder before. And then three was a former coworker of my third co-founder, Robert, who had started a company of their own. And the first three were all like in network. We were just messaging everyone we knew who worked at a tech company. And so that's how we got the first three customers. Then the like next few it started to become like more outbound driven, and specifically from kind of LinkedIn messaging primarily. So we were going on LinkedIn just like we had done in the beginning when we were trying to like understand what to build. And we just kept messaging honestly the same persona, maybe like slightly more scoped down to smaller companies. But yeah, we would just go on LinkedIn, sales nav, like just filter for, hey, companies between this size and this size, and then just message them as much as we could every single day. So it was literally just that to start. No automation, no nothing. It was just like grind it out every single day for a bit. And that's probably how we got like the majority of our early customers, at least during YC, and then even for a little bit after.
And then the persona that you guys were selling to there was again just like the founder, right? So
It could have been, yeah, it was either founder or like some sort of support persona at the company.
yeah, but at that size, I would imagine there'd be a single support
Yeah,
person, and then
exactly.
probably the decision maker in question would still be the founder,
Yep.
regardless.
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
right?
That's right. So like, for example, one of the early customers was this company Courier. And so Nate Munger was the like founding, he actually, I think his title was VP of CS, but I think it was like a one person CS org at the time. And so he was the one we hit up. He, saw the value in the tool and then brought it to the economic buyer, which was the founder.
So there's like these are two meeting, like
It,
1.5 meeting
Yeah,
close it.
well, I will say like because we would basically try to get them into a Slack channel as quickly as possible. So hey, we'd have okay, yeah. If we want to go through like the whole process, we basically would be message them on LinkedIn. They say yes, I'm down for a call. We send them a cal.com link that we hop on the call, show them the product. In that case, for example, they were also evaluating some other tool. And so there was like a little bit of back and forth of like, oh, are you guys better or worse than this other tool? And then we would try to get them into a shared Slack channel so we could communicate with them there, because we found that email was a place where a lot of conversations would just kind of like go to die. Same with LinkedIn, because it's just, there's so much noise. So if we could open up a shared Slack channel with the prospect quickly, then it would just, it felt like it would just increase our odds dramatically. And so that's what we would do. Like immediately at the end of the first call, we would try to open up a shared Slack channel if they were willing. And then we would add, my co-founders into the call. They would add like whatever other relevant team members into the call. And then we would try to get them like into an onboarding process as quickly as possible. So, in that case, I would say it was probably like 3 calls at least with them. And then also communication in that shared Slack channel to get them started. So it definitely wasn't like a quick close. It required effort. It potentially was like fast calls, if I remember correctly, probably like
Short,
probably
like 3 15-minute calls.
Honestly, no,
Like
it was probably
30-minute
longer.
calls?
It was probably 30 minutes. So it really wasn't a short sell. Like it definitely took effort and time, and it's because
Why do you
product
think
was
that was
early.
the case?
I mean, we just didn't know how to sell it. Like there was like everything was new, and so we were trying to figure out what are the right words to use, what like the right pricing should be, and like they're trying to pitch it internally, and they're like, hey, do you have like a case study that you can share? We're like trying to make all this stuff work, like write it in between. And then also the product was not like that good in the beginning, right? So it was like, yes, we have, so like we're trying to get them onboarded. They're running into issues. They run into some edge case where the formatting is not exactly correct or whatever it is. And so, yeah, there would be back and forth where we're like fixing issues in between messages on Slack. And so, yeah, it definitely wasn't like a very quick close, or we'd run into like, for example, our very first like connector was actually not even Zendesk. It was Intercom in Slack. And it was like, okay, we got our first person who wants Zendesk in Slack, so now we have to go build that, but we don't have a demo for it, but like they need to see it. And so it was this, there were a lot of things going on all at once. And so it was probably, it was definitely not like one call closes in the beginning. It was definitely like at least 3 calls.
I think this is why oftentimes, so anytime you have multiple stakeholders that are responsible for a decision, like the ideal scenario is where the person who has the pain is also the person who has the budget by which to solve the pain. So a good example of that would be, I was talking to Dell the other day, right? So AI-driven compliance, SOC 2, HIPAA, ISO 27001, et cetera. Their primary persona is the founder. And the founder is the one who's pissed off about the fact they're not SOC 2 certified because they're also doing founder-led sales, and the SOC 2 certification is blocking them. And so they're the one who's got the pain, and they're also the one that can be like, 15K? Can I get it for 12?
Right.
For you? Of course. Can you sign today? If you can sign today, I can give it to you for 12. Anyway, the point is like that makes for a quick sales motion as compared to like, hey, this is really great. I have to go talk to my boss, right? And of course, like anytime you have fall offs like that, that requires more sales wrangling, which I'm sure you guys quickly figured out that if you started with the the support person or the CSM or whatever, and then they had to loop in that other person, you guys probably had to help them with that to be as proactive as possible. And then of course, when you have something that's laborious like that, the juice has to be worth the squeeze from a monetary standpoint. Did that impact your pricing? Because like, doing three calls in order to get like, I don't know, 5K is probably not something that eventually is like economically viable.
The thing is like, I actually would. So, okay, it's so funny because we are a super cash flow. We're not cash flow positive, but we are like, we have great cash flow. It's amazing actually. Because even though we historically haven't charged that much, we get usually all of that money up front. And so we have like 12 months of upfront cash for the year that just gets forwarded to us. And then, that of course, like gives you, then you just close 12 months upfront the next month, et cetera. And so you just have like this amazing cash flow throughout the company. And so we, actually from a high level business perspective, everything looks really good. And actually when we raised our Series A, we were cash flow positive for the 3 months before. When we raised our series, well, okay, we have something coming up that also is happening in the next 2 weeks that we'll announce, but you can imagine what it is. Basically, we have been burning like 300K per month for the past like 3 months. which is crazy at this size. And it's because we charge all this money up front, and they pay it, and that's great. In terms of the economics, we did not think at all about how like economical our buying process was. Like it was like, eventually this will become more efficient because the product will be better, more self-serve. Like we will like remove ourselves from the conversation. Like, we'll figure other stuff out. So we did not worry about like, hey,
It
3
was
calls
it
for
was
a 10K
doing things
deal.
that didn't scale. It was just
That,
like, you know what? We're gonna figure this out, who the humans are that have to be involved and the right meetings and the right words, et cetera, et cetera. And then then we'll figure out how to make this 2 calls, or then moreover, we'll figure out how to make this 15K or 25K or what have you.
yep, totally. And by the way, so this is where like, this might shock you, especially because you've seen a lot of sales orgs. Like even now today with our 5 AEs, we have people closing minimum 1.2 million per year. And this is like average deal size of around 10K. And that's minimum. Like we have people closing up
Is it
to like
still
2
like
point.
yeah, is this still 3 call closes?
So the thing is, a lot of it can be async. So what will happen is, hey, we hop on that. Sorry, the other important thing about our business today is a lot of it inbound as well. So it like shifted away from outbound to inbound. So people book demos
So
on our calendars.
that'll compress the number of meetings.
Exactly. Yep. It does also mean that we are not in control of like the size of the company that we go after, which is why we're now adding outbound back into the mix. But it is, people like book onto our calendars. It goes straight to an AE. They have a 30-minute call. At the end of that call, we immediately open up the Slack channel, and then we efficiently try to get them on that trial as quickly as possible. And a lot of that communication can happen async. Do we have multiple calls with them? Often, yes, but that's okay. Like it hasn't impacted our ability to have AEs be closing like 100K of like new business ARR every single month, up to like 200 plus K of ARR new business every month. So
So it sounds like maybe the kind of the key here is the Slack selling, right?
the
The
Slack
async
selling,
Slack
super
selling.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, like essentially this is async selling, but historically async selling has been through email, which as you point out, may go into the abyss or what have you. Whereas in this case, we're doing async selling, but we're doing async selling via Slack or maybe Teams. I'm not sure. Um, and which also probably demonstrates the a little bit the value proposition
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
of Pylon, even if it's a pre-revenue kind
Yeah.
of or like pre-sale
Yeah.
example.
Our AEs they like use Pylon every single day as a pre-sales product. It's not built for that, but at the end of the day, it is like an inbox for someone to manage a bunch of shared Slack channels, if you do support over Slack. And so for them, they get to dog food the product a crazy amount. And then the other thing is, it's so meant, like, if you think about customer success and account management post-sales versus what a salesperson does pre-sales, if we make the pre-sales process similar to the post-sales process, where it's like very collaborative with engineering, and you like are like trying to ask for certain features, like post-sales and pre-sales kind of act very similarly at Pylon, where you're asking for like feature requests to get prioritized, and you have product feedback that you send straight to engineers. You do it through Pylon, and so they are able to experience the product and get a lot of value out of it. And it's definitely one of our superpowers.
Yeah, like essentially it's a live demo. By demo, I mean it's like, oh, I could totally see what this would look like, putting myself in my customer's shoes
Right.
about how compelling this would be.
Right. Yep.
I love it. What was something that just, I mean, I think one of the things you just maybe mentioned that worked really well was this like micro async or messaging async selling. What was something else that worked just really great? That was a big unlock for you.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, the obvious one for us, where, yeah, as you mentioned, the very beginning, doing LinkedIn marketing and like founder-led content worked wonders for us. The story with that in our case was, we had one guy, Breck, who was in our YC batch, and he said that they were doing like construction payroll. He was like, oh, LinkedIn's producing a ton of leads for us. It's great. And he at the time probably had like 5K followers. And we were like, oh, wow, that's so many followers. He's huge. And so we had no idea. And we just decided, okay, we're going to start posting for fun and see, maybe it produces something. And our content was so bad in the beginning. It definitely didn't produce any results. But
Huh.
then we had one post probably like 2-3 months in that really took off. And it was more of like founder journey content, like build in public type thing, where it was like, hey, here's how quickly we built our MVP. And it was a photo of the founders and more storytelling, and that just took off. And then, we kept posting more and more content like that. It, did really well, like 300K impressions per post. And then that, we started hearing from our prospects and customers like, oh, like, yeah, saw you guys on LinkedIn, et cetera. We're like, okay, that might be a really good channel for us to start milking. And so, we knew that we now knew what types of posts could work potentially. So, we had kind of the build in public storytelling type of content. And then we also knew previously that, hey, the way we found our initial customers was on LinkedIn. And so they're clearly there. And so we could kind of marry these two. And so, for example, things we started doing initially, we had like more like connection requests, automated connection requests that were going out to people that were more selly. So it was basically trying to like find the pain point immediately. We swapped it and we said, okay, instead, let's actually send connection requests to people that are just meant to have them accept rather than try to get them to a demo. So instead of saying, hey, like, do you have a problem with scaling customer support on Slack? It would now be CS network. And like, that would be it. That's the whole message. And so it's like, or like founder building in CS or with a wavy hand. And so, we'd send that. The goal is get them into our connections list. And then from there, they're going to see our content get dripped essentially forever and until they need the tool. And we know all of these people need the tool eventually. So it's just a matter of time before, that day comes. And then they'll hopefully see a post from Pylon, remember Pylon, and then come to us.
I love it. Okay, so that's something that worked great. What was something that totally didn't?
Let's see. We had, like we tried to like automate outbound in the beginning and it like did not work very well. I had this like crazy complex clay table that was like doing a bunch of stuff. Like this was like over 2 years ago. And I had like this whole like Slack app where I could like drop in a LinkedIn domain. It would like go enrich it, grab a bunch of contacts and then send automated emails to them. And it just like was not like, I spent so much time trying to like perfect this machine and I was like, oh, it's just going to automate everything for me. And it just did not really work that well. And so I like, honestly, like just sending personalized messages like myself was working so much better. And I think like you can build a machine that does this well, but you need to invest a lot into it. And I think I was like I thought it was just like the tactical piece of like, like letting me drop in a LinkedIn URL and then like the enrichment of the contacts and then sending the same message. It just like wasn't working for us. So I invested way too much time there, did not work, and did a poor job. I think it could have worked if we had like invested, if we had basically thought more about the copy and like, and been like more data driven about everything, but we were trying to balance many things at once. And at the time, also our LinkedIn content was starting to take off. So that started to become more of the primary way of getting pipeline.
I think it's definitely something that folks have to worry about is especially folks who have engineering or like a systems thinking background is to over systematize something before you actually have the beginnings of it working.
Yep.
And the funny thing about that is one of the best ways to make sure that you get to a working recipe is to do it manually initially.
Right.
So once you do it manually enough times, kind of find all the nooks and crannies and the optimizations then, and then you can kind of seek to potentially automate at the edges, right? Not like full blown because oftentimes something will be lost, right? And oftentimes what people will do is they'll just like start out, looking for the full automation, the full kind of like automation approach, and then what can be a bummer there is that they can then dismiss that entire channel, even though if they had done it in a more experimental kind of like crawl, walk, run approach, they would be more successful. So LinkedIn content worked really well, and you scaled it, but I would imagine at this point you've got a bunch of sellers, and so it's probably topping out, and also you can't really target exactly the customers that you're looking to do. I mean, obviously, like LinkedIn,
That's right.
Marketing, you can take posts that maybe performed well over here and then use them essentially as ads to target folks. So I imagine you're probably doing that in order to control, the size of organization that is seeing your message. But outside of that, I would imagine you're starting to think about other channels. Like, what are you doing there?
Yeah, definitely. We're starting to invest into outbound now. So over the past couple months, we, have had AEs start to outbound. We hired our first set of SDRs. So one joined 3 weeks ago. The second joined today, actually. And so they are starting to help build out pipe that is more targeted. And it's literally just, hey, we're going to make cold call sequences, cold email sequences, like just the basics, honestly, and just have them smile and dial. And we're trying out tools to kind of help us with this to be a little smarter. So first off, like who do we target? We generated a target account list that's we got basically a list of a bunch like millions of companies. We like filtered that down based on some like high level criteria and then use Clay to enrich it further to figure out like who within that to target. So we tried to enrich like, hey, are they obviously B2B? Are they the right size? Like, are they in the US? Do they have their personas in the US? How many CSMs do they have versus support people? Like kind of all these variables we tried to, or even do they use Zendesk? That's something you can sometimes find out. So we created that target account list, now have it assignable to both AEs and the SDRs. And then we're using Ample Market as our kind of like go-to-market tool for the AEs and SDRs to be using. So yeah, that's what they're using for outbound today.
Also, and I think the other thing that I'm hearing there as well is that when you originally started doing your outbound, it was very early on.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and I think you were doing so you were probably doing outbound that was for the Slack connector message.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I think what's funny about that is probably harder to identify, externally who has that need. Whereas now you have a holistic narrative about being the support platform for B2B
Yep.
companies.
Yep.
So now the audience that you can identify externally are like, oh, here's this title of VP of customer success or whatever. When you were targeting those folks before and showing up and saying, hey, do you need to automate your customer success Slack channels?
Yep.
Their response to that would have been like, no, or sorry,
Right.
a much smaller set of folks
Yep.
were available to say, yeah, that was top of mind for us. Whereas now you can show up and say, hey, are you a B2B like support organization and you're frustrated, like living in, email ticket land or like with
Right.
legacy systems like
Right.
Zendesk or what have you? Well, we're modern and specific for that. The TAM
Yep.
of your message is larger now, and then also the information that's available externally, like being able to see that someone's on Zendesk or on
Right.
Intercom, so you can target them,
Yep.
probably makes it such that your outbound messaging is a lot higher conversion than it could have possibly been previously, unless you could have somehow magically figured out people who were using Slack
Yep. Yep.
internally and then outbound to them. That might have
Yep.
worked, but
Yep.
how you could do that,
Yeah.
I don't
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough.
know. I like it. Well, I'm glad to hear and then I think this is something that founders need to do, like as the things update, if you will, right? Like as your market changes, as your message changes, whatever. Sometimes like going back to prior channels can
Yep.
can be effective
Yep.
there.
And like,
You
yeah.
just have to update your GTM priors.
Yep, exactly. And like, for example, now that we're trying to be more targeted and we have a target account list, now like ABM makes way more sense, right? Like I totally buy into this like strategy of, okay, if we have our target accounts, like we want them to be aware of us. So let's run some LinkedIn ads specifically on these people and like, make sure like it makes way more sense to have this like 360 view of like, we're going to target them with ads first, then we're going to call them, then we're going to email them, then we're going to like make sure they see like some piece of send a connection request. I like, it just makes sense that if you run ads just like randomly, it's not going to work super well. If you run ads on like a target set of accounts that you're also trying to reach out to at the same time, just probably gives you a better shot at hitting them up and getting in touch with them. So I think like honestly, the tried and true ABM stuff is like what we're iterating towards.
Yeah, and historically, one of the reasons why ABM things had been challenging for folks was that being able to target down to the per human level on LinkedIn
Yep.
was not really available like 5 years ago
Right.
or 7 years ago or whatever when it's almost there's products like Vector and what have you that get down to the contact level, and which is important, right? Because an organization, does an organization care about Pylon, or does the VP of customer success, the VP of customer success and the customer success operations lead, do those people in that organization care about Pylon? Yeah, they're the ones who care about that,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't want to put ads in front of the entire organization. Moreover, I don't want to outbound the entire
Yeah.
organization. I want to put ads in front of these three personas right here, and then I want to go outbound to those three personas right there. And like it'll be much more resonant to them, and it'll be like, a much better use of my SDRs and my AEs time if we're targeted, if the supply and the demand are well targeted with each other.
Yeah. No, what I 100% agree. It's actually really funny. So we were running ads for a bit. We like let go of basically the person who was doing growth for us, left. Then we realized that like 70% of our ads were going to people at Salesforce. And it was like when the new person joined, it was like, damn it. Like literally this is one of those like, yeah, it's like we're just throwing money into the drain. And it's like, okay, maybe that's why ads aren't working. If we're like 70% of them are going to like one company that we can't even sell to. So
That's amazing. So, I think one of the things you said worked really well in your GTM was offering Slack channels to prospects. Probably that also worked well from a customer success standpoint
yep.
as well. I mean, you guys are presumably you use
Yeah. Yeah.
Pylon
We have
or
like,
Pylon.
we have probably like 1,500 Slack channels now with both prospects and customers, which is insane. And so with Pylon, obviously it's super scalable and it doesn't matter. And so we get to like be extreme on that front where we get all the benefits of using it during the sales process and none of the downsides of having it in the post-sales process.
I love it. What did you guys not do well when it came to customer success and like during your founder-led GTM period?
Probably not hiring. This is like a theme across the company, like not hiring people fast enough. I think like both on the customer success side and the sales side and the marketing side, like all of these roles, suddenly once the ball starts rolling, you realize you're way behind on everything and you like need people ASAP. And so I think we hired our first AE too late. We hired first AE at the point, like by the time they joined, we probably closed like $1 million in AR. And it's like, okay, we probably could have hired someone sooner who could have ramped up on or ramped up on the product faster. And, you don't realize when you're a founder early on that, hey, it takes time to hire it, they're going to have to ramp, like they're going to have to like do all these things. And, yeah, that was not something we were thinking about. We were just like focused on making our customers happy and, building a product that they really like. So yeah, on the sales front, could have hired faster. On the CS front, we just started getting like so many customers at that point where, and with no CSM, and we're just like totally overloaded. And we didn't yet have an idea in our head of like, okay, how can a CSM come in and like take some of this load off of us? So, yeah, part of us were like fearful they wouldn't be able to do a good job. Now we have CSMs who are amazing. And, it's like, okay, how did we live without them before?
So early on, what was your initial sales stack?
Let's see. So initial sales stack was actually this company that's no longer around anymore. So one of them was Rift. If you know them, they were actually a YC batchmate of ours. And so they were a really great company. We had never written an email sequence before. And so they, were building kind of like an outreach competitor at the time. So we used them to start. We used Clay. We used, let's see, Sales Nav and LinkedIn, of course, for just like DMing people. So our initial CRM was Notion, but then we jumped to Salesforce actually, which is super unique. And we did this as a YC company. So no one does this these days, but we thought it was important to understand our customer base because all of them wanted Salesforce integrations that we kind of start to operate like them. And then also we had heard from so many heads of sales that like, hey, you're eventually going to need Salesforce and you just don't understand that yet. And so we said, okay, let's bite the bullet. We don't want to do 2 migrations in the future. What if we just like hop to Salesforce now? And frankly, now that we hired our first RevOps person, like past 3 weeks, I'm so happy we did because that we use Salesforce from the start. Because now all that data is in there. We don't have all the like change tracking on every field, but we definitely understand how real companies operate in terms of, terminology, in terms of like how they model data, and why they like Salesforce as a product. And so that was extremely helpful actually, to start from that point, understand our customers. And then now it's so nice to not have to do like a HubSpot to Salesforce migration or something of that nature.
I mean, I think that that's kind of like if your product requires some sort of meaningful integration that your customers are going to end up using, or like your customers have a technographic requirement, to the extent that you can use that internally, especially so your account executives and customer success people
Yep.
know like what's an account object, what's a
Right.
contact object,
Right.
what's an opportunity, oh,
Right.
workflow rule, et cetera, versus um and like so they're in the water,
Right.
so to speak. I can't think of a ton of other examples of that. I mean, I like Atrium, my software company, is a good example of that. But I think because like we used Salesforce even when it was
Right.
just me doing founder-led sales for the same reasons. But I think it would be the same thing if folks are thinking about like, what their customers need and so they can have great customer empathy. How
Yep.
many, wait, you said you closed $1 million in ARR before you
Yeah.
guys hired an account executive at a 10K ASP, that's like 100
Yeah. It was a
customers.
ton of deals. Yeah. It was probably 100. It was insane. Yeah. And it was, I mean, let's see, you know, yeah, I mean, it was brutal. And so we basically, and that was before also we had a CSM or, support person. And so it was, we're super grindy as founders. And so we were just doing all the customer facing work from day one. So the way we split it up, I was on pre-sales duty, so marketing and sales. And then my co-founders were on like product and post-sales duty. And so they were focused on, and I think it's good to have that like quick iteration loop where, hey, someone becomes a customer, they give the feedback, and then the same person is the one who has to build the product. And so there is that like really tight feedback loop where they can turn it around. So it did work well, but yeah, as I said, we should have, like our investors told us this, like yeah, lots of people recommended like, hey, you should hire AEs sooner. We just did not listen. And then one day you think about it, you're like, how nice would it be if we had an AE who like closed deals? And it's like, wow, that would make my life amazing.
I mean, in fairness, the product was changing substantially. So the first 10 customers or 20 customers were the you know,
Yep.
Slack, like Zendesk integrator. And then eventually you guys started adding more like the, full support platform. And so I imagine maybe you're like middle 20
Right.
customers, or maybe like, customers 50 through 70 started buying for those reasons right there.
Yep.
So I definitely see that. I mean, the recommendation I usually give is if once you get to the point where the sales motion is highly repeatable, it's like when
Right.
you get to the top of the S curve,
Right.
then that's the point at which you can bring in an additional account executive.
Yep.
But if the sales motion is changing,
Yeah.
right? Like the personas are like, hey, we closed 20 customers, and in so doing, realized that we should totally change our product.
Right.
Let's go ahead and bring in a new account executive to figure out
Right.
this new sales motion. That doesn't sound like a great idea
Right.
there,
Right.
right?
Right.
Versus, no, when it gets to the point where it's gelled,
Right.
right, where we're actually not hacking on it anymore, and now we can package it, that's the point. Now, maybe that was at 60 customers, you could have done that.
Right.
But I think it's important for folks to like use the heuristic of highly repeatable in
Right.
a predictable fashion, such that it is packageable,
Right.
and you're not relying on an account executive to, create things. They can do iterations around the edges and improvements and so on and so forth, but they're not like doing the big, like, authoring of the sales software, if you will.
Right. 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 Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that changes? I guess like question to you, like over time, because for example, let's say you're trying to expand into upmarket or something, or like you're like, okay, let's start doing enterprise. Like, do you recommend people like, figure that out themselves as
Yep.
AE or sorry, as founders, or you hire?
Generally speaking, yeah. Well, like anytime, and you see this, it's something that trips organizations up quite a bit when organizations go multi-product, or when they go to a new segment, or when they go to a new, theater, like new region or what have you. Oftentimes, for whatever reason, they'll think, oh, I'll just place an account executive there without considering, well, this is a new motion, right? This requires a new recipe. Now, it might be a tangential recipe going from SMB to mid-market, is tangential, but usually when you're selling a new product. So like an example of this that pops to mind is Lattice, right? Like when Lattice was selling, performance management software, but then they eventually shipped a HRIS, right? And they eventually shipped a comp management solution. Usually, what you want to see there is like the product. It could be the founder it might be the product manager who's doing the initial selling there, because like the product manager is the founder of that, that new product or what have you. But asking an account executive, like, grabbing an enterprise account executive and plopping them in over here and saying like, hey, go ahead and take Pylon up market, would probably be risky.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, we've definitely found that we are generally the ones who, I mean, we're thinking about this both from like a PM perspective as well. So for example, one place that we hired too late is PMs. And so we have no PMs right now. It's Advith and Robert, my co-founders, who are playing that role. And we do ask ourselves the question, hey, should the PMs be people who kind of harden the existing parts of the product, or like develop the new parts of the product that are kind of like more experimental, and on the cutting edge? And yeah, we've gone back and forth on who the right type of person is to have for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
It's
then
like a
on the sales
related
side,
question.
yeah, sales side as well. It's like, okay, we do have, for example, we could go and sell our connector product, which actually ends up being a really good wedge for us up market, as a like starting point, and then trying to cross sell the rest of the platform in. And yeah, it's like, okay, we could, yeah, could we like find some enterprise rep to go do that to start,
So yeah,
or like,
just do that. Yeah.
yeah,
I
or
mean,
even like the outbound stuff, right? Like, do I need to go and be the one who figures out how to cold? So, for example, like this is one place where I have gotten stuck up, and I did make the decision. Okay, there are probably people better than me who can start with this. So, for example, cold calling. I could like go grind out and become good at cold calling, but at the same time, I'm so busy now throughout the day where I feel like I have to rely on other people to figure out the cold calling process. And so I have like created a team that should be able to figure it out. So, there's the RevOps lead that we have, who, experienced guy, had made target account lists, has enriched them, has scored them, whatever. So, okay, part one is like make the list of accounts that are relevant for the sales team. Then it's like, okay, two, can the AEs or the SDRs create the right like sequences that can actually go after them, or do they need help with that? And so I'm like hoping that the team together can figure this out with themselves. But it's definitely a risk if it is a net new thing we're trying to accomplish. But so
yeah,
far, so far, some people are figuring it out. Is the conclusion?
yeah, I'm reminded of Keith Rabois's kind of example, a metaphor that he likes to use around like barrels versus ammunition. And so like barrels are the type of, I think that the article, I don't know if it's a series of podcasts or an article called How to Operate, where he
Mm,
talks about the notion of, his metaphor is like a barrel is somebody who can, you can hand a project to and say like, figure this out, drive this outcome,
right,
right? As compared to, ammunition, which is the individuals who can do a thing if
right,
it has been defined for them.
right,
And
right.
identifying folks who usually, like, founders are the quintessential barrel, because they're doing that with an organization. And this is oftentimes why you see some organizations like to hire former founders to come in and
Yep,
be a barrel in some sort of capacity.
yep.
I'm unclear what the how you would solve that with your cold calling situation, but I think the important thing for founders to realize is that this definitely applies to sub projects within the go to market, like figuring out cold calling or figuring out outbound or what have you. And if you hand that creation process to like an SDR or an account executive, generally you're going to be disappointed, because those folks are more attuned to repeating the thing that's
Right,
like, here's this recipe. Hey, thank you for the recipe. I'm gonna chop the
right,
hell out of these onions.
right,
Like, here I go.
right, right,
Right. And like that's the common behavior in which most, or the common mode in which most people operate. And so it can be very shocking and disappointing to founders who are like, well, hey, just figure it out. Like, that's what
right,
I do. I just
right.
figure everything out. It's like, yeah, they're not you, right? So I think just be careful there. There's a related management kind of lesson here as well. Like, and I work with a lot of early stage founders, and one of the companies I'm working with, they have like 4 AEs or whatever, and the founder is a software engineer, and the head of sales is a former management consultant or what have you. They're used to working with like a fairly rarefied set of folks who are highly, can like govern themselves, solve problems, et cetera, and also are maybe a little bit more resistant to micromanagement. And so I've had to continually remind them about the level of specificity with which they need to define the various processes
Right.
that the account executive should be doing, the SDR should be
Right.
doing, and what have you, versus like, the it's like the opposite of an exercise left to engineering. It's like, no, we're not going to leave any. There should not be any exercise left up to sales
Yep.
here.
Yep.
So speaking of which, what was the profile for your first sales hire?
Yeah.
I would imagine it's more of like this viral behavior.
So he was actually, his name's Sergio. He was actually at so what were we looking for? There were three criteria I generally wanted. One was I wanted someone who came off as smart, someone who was going to work really hard, and then someone who I would buy from. Those were like the three high level criteria I used. And so,
Same guy.
nothing of like the like super structured, like, okay, I need to like understand if they know medic or something like that. Or, I wasn't even evaluating on like outbound because we didn't have outbound at the time. It was all inbound and like my calendar was drowning. So I was just like, I need someone who can hop on calls, be consultative and just, help prospects like start using Pylon. And so, yeah, basically had those three criteria and then generally was looking for people who had worked, sold SaaS before. I thought like, hey, at least a couple of years, to ideally like selling to tech companies as well, because I feel like the way you speak to tech companies is like a different language. And you don't say things in like bigger words that are like more abstract. You just like say the thing.
Yeah, more candid. Yeah.
Yeah. And more like casual. And so, yeah, basically, put out a LinkedIn post, said, hey, we're hiring. And one of the people that applied was Sergio. He was at the seed stage company before that was also, they were selling like knowledge-based software. It was a company called Guide, if you know them, with two Ds. And so they were selling knowledge-based software. I was like, okay, it's also similar to us. Like we sell customer support software, like they're kind of adjacent. And yeah, just like really clicked with him. And so it's interesting, like in terms of like his interests for like being a barrel versus ammunition, I think definitely he had a lot of interest in being the barrel. But then we were just so busy that like there just really wasn't time. And so it was more ammunition type work. And then our second AE was her name's Mana, and she basically came in. She absolute killer. We had interviewed a bunch of people in between Sergio and Mana. Once again, kind of looked for very similar criteria. And yeah, she just like absolutely nailed it and then came in and immediately started taking calls and doing well. So
I love it. What did you guys do particularly well during hiring and onboarding and
yeah.
managing your new sellers?
So I trained the first two myself. And so it was basically, hey, they joined, I would walk them through the product. And I was really just trying to like hammer down, hey, here's how you demo the product. Here's how to understand it. Here's how the puzzle pieces fit together and try to teach them how to be consultative. So like when someone joins a call, ask them why they're there and then try to assemble the Lego pieces in a way that makes sense for them. So it was really mostly product knowledge.
I love it. Well, Marty, this was fantastic. I think we're up on everything that I wanted to cover. If you had one kind of parting shot that you would present to yourself or someone like you 24 months ago, what would be your kind of final word there?
Probably listen to or like try to talk to more people like me who are 2 years ahead. I think that's probably like the best advice. People who have kind of like made it through and found some success. So I think like all the things I could say, like sell before build or like, do things that don't scale, like, definitely do those, but then just talk to more people or listen to more people because you'll probably learn everything. Yeah.
I love it. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Marty. I appreciate you taking the time. We'll see you soon.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, bye.